The great hall of Halford Castle echoed with the sound of minstrels playing somber tunes. Baron Cedric of Dunhold stood near a massive stone fireplace, swirling wine in a silver goblet as he observed the gathering. His dark attire, layers of black leather and wool with silver accents, marked him as a man in mourning, though the shrewd gleam in his eyes betrayed his true feelings. "Your grief becomes you, Baron," came a silky voice from behind him, "though perhaps it sits a bit too lightly on your shoulders." Cedric turned to find Lord Darius Halford, a man in his 60s with calculating eyes and a neatly trimmed white beard. The aging duke's fur-trimmed cloak bore the emblem of his house, a silver hawk in flight. "My Lord Duke," Cedric bowed slightly. "I mourn as deeply as propriety demands." Elswyn was dutiful. "Such passionate praise," Darius remarked dryly. "I wonder if my daughter might expect similar tributes should she become your wife." Cedric's grip tightened imperceptibly on his goblet. "Lady Mayera would inspire far greater eloquence, I assure you. Her beauty and intelligence are unmatched in the Northern Territories." The Duke raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Save your flattery, Cedric. We both know this alliance would be one of mutual benefit, not poetry." Before Cedric could respond, a young servant approached them, bowing nervously. "My Lord Duke, a messenger has arrived from the southern kingdoms. He brings news from Thalwyn." Darius frowned. "Thalwyn? What business would King Alaric have with us?" "Not with you directly, my lord. The messenger speaks of a feast held at Hywyn Castle to celebrate the spring solstice." The servant hesitated. "He mentioned a new advisor to the king, a woman from the south. His description, well, it has caused quite a stir below stairs." Cedric's expression remained neutral, though his knuckles whitened around his goblet. "What description?" The servant glanced between the two noblemen. "A woman of uncommon beauty with auburn hair and striking green eyes. They say the king himself escorted her to the high table." An uncomfortable silence fell between Cedric and Darius as the servant was dismissed. The description was too specific to ignore, too familiar to be coincidence. "Uncommon beauty, auburn hair, green eyes," Darius mused, watching Cedric closely. "Your late wife had such features, did she not?" "Many women share such traits," Cedric replied, his voice carefully controlled. "And Elswyn is dead. I buried her myself." "Did you?" Darius challenged softly. "Or did you merely announce her burial?" Cedric's jaw tightened. "I would not lie about such matters, especially to my future father-in-law." Darius studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "See that you don't." "Halford does not ally itself with houses built on deception." He straightened his already impeccable robes. "Now, I believe my daughter awaits your attention in the Eastern Solar. Do try to appear more enthusiastic about her company than you were about your late wife's." As the Duke walked away, Cedric downed his wine in one swift motion, his mind racing. The timing was too perfect, the description too accurate. Could Elswyn have survived the desert? And if so, how had she found her way to King Alaric's court? "Impossible," he muttered to himself. Yet even as he set off to court Lady Mayera, he resolved to send spies south. If by some miracle Elswyn lived, she posed a threat he could not afford. Meanwhile, in Hywyn Castle, the solstice feast was reaching its zenith. The great hall blazed, with hundreds of torches and candles, illuminating tapestries depicting the legendary deeds of Thalwyn's royal line. Long tables groaned under the weight of elaborate dishes, roasted meats, fresh bread, early spring vegetables preserved through the winter, and sweets of every description. Seated at the high table beside King Alaric, Elswyn tried to maintain an air of calm despite the countless eyes fixed upon her. She was acutely aware of how she must appear to the court, an unknown woman suddenly elevated to the king's side, dressed in finery that rivaled that of any noblewoman present. "You're handling their scrutiny with remarkable grace," Alaric commented quietly, leaning slightly toward her. "Most would fidget under such attention." Elswyn took a small sip of wine before responding. "I was the wife of Baron Cedric for 3 years, Your Majesty. I learned to endure scrutiny without revealing discomfort." Alaric's expression darkened momentarily at the mention of Cedric. A skill that serves you well tonight, though I'd prefer you found more pleasure than endurance in your new position. The pleasure comes from the company, not the circumstances, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. A hint of a smile touched Alaric's lips. Well said, Lady Elswyn. He gestured toward the gathered nobility. What do you make of my court, now that you've observed it for an evening? Elswyn considered carefully before answering. They are like any court, divided between those who serve you out of genuine loyalty and those who serve their own ambitions. The challenge lies in discerning which is which. And have you made such discernments already? Some, she admitted. Lord Reynard watches you too closely, measuring each reaction as if collecting information. Lady Elspeth, however, seems genuinely devoted. She speaks to defend your policies even when you're not listening. Alaric's eyebrows rose slightly. You've been paying close attention. I've had little else to do but observe since my arrival, Elswyn explained. And observation was my primary defense in my previous life. The king nodded thoughtfully. Your insights align with my own assessments. Perhaps I was right to name you advisor after all. As their conversation continued, Lord Reynard approached the high table, bowing deeply. His elaborate court attire, layers of burgundy silk and black leather with gold threading, spoke of considerable wealth. Your Majesty, he intoned, his voice carefully modulated to carry just far enough. The feast is magnificent, as always. Lord Reynard, Alaric acknowledged with a slight nod. I trust you're enjoying yourself. Immensely. Reynard's gaze shifted to Elswyn, curiosity evident in his eyes. And might I have the honor of being introduced to your companion? We are all most intrigued by your new advisor. The slight pause before the word advisor carried insinuations that made Elswyn's spine stiffen. Alaric's expression remained impassive. Lord Reynard, may I present Lady Elswyn of the Southern Territories. She brings valuable perspectives on trade and cultural matters that will benefit Thalwyn greatly. How fortunate for us all, Reynard replied smoothly, his eyes never leaving Elswyn's face. I wasn't aware we had such pressing concerns with the South. Perhaps that is precisely why her counsel is needed, Elswyn responded before Alaric could speak. Opportunities often lie where attention has not yet turned. Reynard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Indeed, and what specific region of the South do you hail from, my lady? The coastal provinces near Meridian Bay, she answered without hesitation, naming an area remote enough to discourage easy verification. My late husband was a merchant trader there. How fascinating. I have contacts in Meridian who might know of your family. I'm sure Lady Elswyn would be happy to discuss Southern politics with you at a more appropriate time. Alaric interrupted, his tone making it clear the conversation was finished. For now, I believe the minstrels are preparing for the evening's main performance. Recognizing dismissal, Reynard bowed again and retreated, though his calculating gaze lingered on Elswyn. He doesn't believe me, she murmured once he was out of earshot. Reynard doubts everything and everyone, Alaric replied. It's his nature, but he won't challenge me directly. He values his position too much. The feast continued well into the night. As promised, there were elaborate performances by the royal minstrels, acrobats from distant lands, and even a brief mock battle staged by the king's guard. Throughout it all, Elswyn remained by Alaric's side, increasingly aware of the whispers that followed their every interaction. When the festivities finally began to wind down, Alaric stood, offering his arm to Elswyn in a gesture that sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the hall. Allow me to escort you back to your chambers, he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Dawn comes early and we have matters of state to discuss tomorrow. The walk through Highwind's torch-lit corridors was conducted in comfortable silence. Guards stationed at regular intervals bowed as they passed, their expressions carefully neutral despite their obvious curiosity. When they reached the door to Elswyn's chambers, Alaric paused. You did well tonight, better than well. Thank you, Your Majesty. He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. In private, when we are not at court, you might call me Alaric. The request surprised her. That would hardly be proper. Propriety is a shield used in public, he countered. In private, it can become a wall that prevents true understanding. Elswyn studied his face, the strong lines, the subtle signs of the burdens he carried, the unexpected warmth in eyes most saw as merely stern. As you wish. Alaric, she said finally, testing the name on her tongue. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his features. Rest well, Elswyn. Tomorrow we begin your true integration into court life. As she watched him stride away, Elswyn felt a curious mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The court's reaction to her had been precisely as expected, curiosity tinged with suspicion. Yet the king's growing attachment was something she hadn't fully anticipated. Inside her chambers, she found Lady Winna dozing in a chair beside Edrin's cradle. The older woman stirred as Elswyn entered. "How was the feast?" Winna asked, blinking sleep from her eyes. Elswyn began unfastening the elaborate gown, her mind still processing the evening's events. Illuminating. The king has made his favor clear, perhaps too clear. Is that concern I hear in your voice? Winna moved to help with the more difficult lacings. Most women would be thrilled to have captured Alaric's attention so thoroughly. I'm not most women, Elswyn replied softly, gazing at her sleeping son. And I cannot afford to mistake kindness for something more. Not when Edrin's safety depends on my clear judgment. Winna's weathered hands stilled momentarily. And if it is something more, kings do not typically escort cultural advisors personally, nor do they invite them to use their given names. Elswyn turned to face the healer, her expression serious. Then that is a complexity I am not yet ready to confront. She moved to the cradle, gently adjusting the blanket around Edrin. For now, I must focus on establishing my place here, a place secure enough to protect my son, regardless of the king's favor. But as she prepared for bed that night, Elswyn found her thoughts returning repeatedly to the way Alaric had smiled when she spoke his name. Something was shifting between them, something that went beyond gratitude or political alliance, and, somewhere far to the north, Baron Cedric of Dunhold dispatched his most trusted spy toward Thalwyn, determined to uncover the truth about the mysterious southern beauty who had so captivated King Alaric. Spring had fully yielded to summer in Thalwyn. 2 months had passed since the solstice feast, and Lady Elswyn had settled into a routine that few would have thought possible when she first arrived half-dead at Highwyn's gates. The chambers that had once felt temporary now bore the unmistakable marks of permanence. Tapestries depicting southern landscapes, books collected from the royal library, and a small desk where she often worked late into the night. On this particular morning, Elswyn sat in the king's private council chamber, listening as Lord Reynard detailed the latest border disputes with the eastern territories. She wore a gown of deep blue with subtle silver embroidery, the colors of Thalwyn, though she had carefully avoided incorporating any specific royal emblems that might seem presumptuous. The eastern lords claim our patrols have crossed the boundaries established in the Treaty of Blackmere, Reynard explained, pointing to locations on the large map spread across the oak table. They demand compensation and a formal apology. King Alaric's expression remained impassive as he studied the map. Over the past weeks, Elswyn had learned to read the subtle signs of his thoughts, the slight narrowing of his eyes when he suspected deception, the almost imperceptible tapping of his index finger when he was considering options. And what evidence do they offer of these alleged incursions? Alaric asked, that telltale finger now tapping softly against the table's edge. None beyond the word of their border farmers, Reynard replied with a dismissive wave. Peasants who would say anything, their lords commanded. Elswyn observed the exchange silently, noting how the other council members, Lord Commander Thorne, Lady Elspeth, and Chancellor Merrin, each reacted to Reynard's characterization. It was Thorne who caught her attention, his weathered face, betraying a flash of discomfort. You disagree, Lord Commander? She asked quietly, breaking her silence for the first time that morning. All eyes turned to her, then to Thorne, who straightened in his chair. I have reports from my own men that suggest our patrols may have indeed crossed the boundaries, he admitted reluctantly. Not intentionally, but the markers in that region have been disputed for generations. Reynard's lip curled slightly. And you share this only now, after allowing me to present contrary information? I received the reports only yesterday evening, Thorne countered. Too late to adjust the council briefings. Alaric raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Lady Elswyn, you have that look in your eyes. What are you thinking? She hadn't realized her thoughts were so transparent to him. I'm thinking that both accounts may be accurate, depending on one's perspective. The boundary markers were established by men who never set foot on the disputed lands, using maps drawn by others who spent perhaps a day surveying territories that stretch for leagues. She rose from her seat, moving to the map. In Dunhold. She hesitated, realizing her slip, then recovered smoothly. In similar disputes in the South, I observed that local knowledge often proves more accurate than official documents. What are you suggesting? Chancellor Marin asked, his scholarly interest piqued. Send a delegation that includes not only royal representatives but also farmers from our side of the border. Meet with their eastern counterparts on the disputed land itself. Let those who work the soil daily help establish boundaries that make practical sense, Reynard scoffed. You would have peasants redrawing the borders of Thalwyn? I would have the king demonstrate wisdom by valuing knowledge regardless of its source, Elswyn replied evenly, and avoid unnecessary conflict over what appears to be a genuine misunderstanding rather than deliberate provocation. A silence fell over the council chamber as all eyes turned to Alaric, awaiting his verdict. The king studied Elswyn for a long moment, his expression unreadable to most, but she saw the approval in his eyes before he spoke. A sensible approach, he declared finally. Lord Commander, select a small delegation from your most diplomatic officers. Chancellor Marin, you will accompany them with the treaty documents, and ensure that several of our border farmers are included, as Lady Elswyn suggests. Reynard's displeasure was evident, though he masked it quickly. As you command, Your Majesty. The meeting continued for another hour, addressing various matters of state. Throughout, Elswyn spoke only when she had something meaningful to contribute, aware that her position remained precarious despite the king's obvious favor. When the council was finally dismissed, Alaric asked her to remain behind. You handled Reynard skillfully, he commented once they were alone. He's not accustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he considers an outsider. Elswyn smiled slightly. I've had practice navigating difficult men with inflated perceptions of their own importance. Cedric, among others. She moved to the window, gazing out at the castle grounds where summer flowers bloomed in carefully tended gardens. How is Edrin today? I haven't seen him since breakfast. Lady Wenna took him to the royal nursery to meet my sister's children who are visiting from the Western Isles, Alaric replied, joining her at the window. My nephew seemed quite taken with him. He's growing so quickly, Elswyn murmured, almost smiling now. Alaric studied her profile, noting the mix of pride and concern that crossed her features whenever she spoke of her son. He's becoming something of a fixture at court, you know. The servants call him the Little Survivor. An apt name, though I pray his life will require less survival and more living than his beginning would suggest. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of castle life drifting through the open window. These quiet moments had become increasingly common over the past weeks, moments when the formal boundaries of king and advisor seemed to blur into something more personal. Walk with me in the gardens? Alaric suggested. There's a matter I'd like to discuss away from the walls that seem to have ears. Curious, Elswyn nodded her agreement. They made their way through the castle corridors, the guards and servants they passed bowing respectfully. Elswyn had grown accustomed to the speculative glances that followed them, the whispers that died away as they approached only to resume once they had passed. The royal gardens were in full bloom, a riot of color and fragrance carefully cultivated to display Thalwyn's horticultural mastery. Stone paths wound between flower beds and decorative shrubs, leading eventually to a secluded alcove sheltered by ancient oak trees. A stone bench sat beneath the largest oak, offering views of the castle on one side and the distant mountains on the other. I come here to think when the crown feels particularly heavy, Alaric confessed as they sat. Few at court know of this place. Elswyn felt honored by the admission. It's beautiful, peaceful, That's why I wanted to speak with you here about something that may disturb that peace. His expression grew serious. A messenger arrived this morning from the Northern Territories. Baron Cedric has formally announced his betrothal to Lady Mara of Halford. Elswyn had expected this news, had prepared herself for it, yet still felt a curious hollowness in her chest. Not from lingering attachment to Cedric, but from the finality it represented. The complete severance of her former life. I see, she said softly. He wasted no time. There's more, Alaric continued, his voice gentle. The messenger also carried rumors, carefully couched, but clear enough to those who listen closely, questioning whether the woman at my court, who matches your description, might be the supposedly deceased Lady of Dunhold. Elswyn's breath caught. He suspects, or someone at Halford does. Either way, your position here may soon be challenged more directly. She nodded slowly, processing this development. What will you do if he makes formal inquiries? Or worse, if he comes himself to investigate? Alaric's jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek. I have considered this possibility from the moment my men found you in the desert. There are several options, none without complication. Such as, I could acknowledge the truth and charge him with attempted murder of his wife and unborn child.
The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Elswyn shook her head. Cedric would claim I went to the desert of my own accord against his advice.
That I was unstable, perhaps, or seeking some spiritual experience during my pregnancy. It would be his word against mine, and he has powerful allies. Not as powerful as a king, Alaric countered, a dangerous edge to his voice. Even kings must tread carefully when accusations fly between noble houses, she reminded him. What are the other options? Alaric hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. I could formally grant you and Edrin asylum in Thalwyn, recognizing you as political refugees from Dunhold. It would effectively acknowledge who you are while placing you under crown protection that even Cedric couldn't challenge without declaring open hostility toward Thalwyn, which would force Duke Halford to reconsider the alliance, Elswyn mused. Clever, but risky. Cedric might decide I'm worth the conflict, if only to silence me permanently. He would not succeed, Alaric said, his voice low and intense. No. Harm would come to you or Edrin while I draw breath. The vehemence of his declaration startled her. Their eyes met, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, something that transcended the political complexities of their situation. Elswyn was the first to look away, her cheeks warming slightly. What is the third option? Alaric took a deep breath. We could continue as we have been, you as Lady Elswyn of the South, advisor to the crown. But we would need to strengthen your position at court, make you so valuable to Thalwyn that challenging your identity would seem petty and irrelevant. And how would we accomplish that? By ensuring that your counsel becomes indispensable not just to me, but to the realm. He gestured toward the castle. Already your suggestions regarding the eastern border dispute have been well received. You have a perspective my other advisors lack, compassion balanced with pragmatism, a view that considers all levels of society, not merely the nobility. Elswyn considered his words carefully. You would elevate me further? I would recognize the value you already bring. He corrected gently. Beginning with tonight's court session, where I intend to announce the formation of a new council focused on improving conditions in our rural provinces, with you as its head. The proposal took her by surprise. Such a position would give her real power, not merely advisory influence. It would also place her firmly in the political landscape of Thalwyn, making her more than just the mysterious woman at the king's side. Why? She asked simply. Alaric's expression softened. Because you have earned it. Because your perspective is needed. And because... He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. Because I find myself increasingly unwilling to imagine Thalwyn without you in it. The admission hung between them, neither fully personal nor entirely political. Elswyn felt her heart quicken at the implications, even as her practical mind warned her against reading too much into his words. I accept, she said finally. Though, Cedric will not abandon his suspicions so easily. Let him suspect, Alaric replied, rising from the bench and offering her his hand. While he plots in the shadows, you will stand in the light, building a new life that renders his schemes irrelevant. As they walked back toward the castle, Elswyn found herself wondering which path they had truly chosen: formal protection, political elevation, or perhaps something that combined elements of both while adding dimensions neither had explicitly acknowledged. That evening, when King Alaric announced her appointment to the newly formed Rural Affairs Council, the court's reaction was mixed but largely favorable. What had begun as whispers about the king's mysterious companion had evolved into genuine respect for her insights and contributions. Only Lord Reynard watched the proceedings with calculated eyes, mentally composing a letter to his contacts in the north, contacts who might be very interested to learn more about the rising influence of Lady Elswyn of Thalwyn. Baron Cedric of Dunhold paced the length of his private chambers, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. The letter from Lord Reynard lay open on his desk, the elegant script belying the explosive nature of its contents. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, matching his dark mood. "She lives," he muttered, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "Not only lives, but thrives at Alaric's court." A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he barked. Galen, his most trusted advisor and spy master, stepped into the room. The lean man's traveling clothes were still damp from the journey north, but his eyes were alert, missing nothing. "You summon me urgently, my lord." Cedric gestured to the letter. "Read it. Then tell me if it confirms what your own sources have reported." Galen scanned the document quickly, his expression remaining neutral. When he finished, he carefully refolded the parchment before speaking. "It aligns with what my agent in Highwind observed. The woman calling herself Lady Elswyn of the Southern Territories matches your late wife's description precisely. Moreover, she has a male infant of appropriate age. And now Alaric has appointed her to head a council," Cedric said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "A nobody from nowhere, suddenly advising on matters of state. Hardly a nobody if she is who we suspect," Galen pointed out carefully. "Lady Elswyn was of noble birth before your marriage." Cedric shot him a dangerous look. "A minor noble house with more history than wealth or influence. Nothing that explains her rapid rise in Thalwyn." "Perhaps the explanation lies elsewhere," Galen suggested, choosing his words with deliberate caution. "My agent reports that King Alaric shows her particular favor." "You mean he's betting her?" Cedric said bluntly. "Interestingly, no. At least not according to the castle servants who would know such things. Their relationship appears more complex." Cedric resumed his pacing, mind racing. "Complex or not, she presents a problem. If word spreads that I abandoned my pregnant wife in the desert, the Halford alliance would collapse," Galen finished. "Duke Darius is many things, but he holds certain principles sacrosanct. The sanctity of bloodlines is chief among them. And Lady Maera is his only child. His legacy." Cedric stopped at the window, staring out at the rain-soaked courtyard. "The marriage contract is nearly finalized. In 2 months' time, Dunhold and Halford will be joined, doubling our military strength and securing our northern borders." Galen moved to stand beside his lord. "What do you intend to do about the complication in Thalwyn?" A cold smile spread slowly across Cedric's face. "First, we verify beyond doubt that this southern advisor is indeed my supposedly dead wife. Then we begin gathering our allies. If Elswyn has found protection with a king, then I shall need the support of those who might challenge that king's authority." "You would risk open conflict with Thalwyn?" Galen asked, unable to hide his surprise. "King Alaric's military prowess is legendary. He's never lost a battle." "Every man can be defeated, Galen. One must simply find the right pressure point." Cedric turned from the window, his decision made. "Send word to our allies. We'll convene a council here in 3 days' time. And dispatch your best agent to Highwind, not merely to observe, but to act when the moment is right." Meanwhile, in the Great Hall of Highwind Castle, tensions were rising as the Royal Council debated the growing threat from the Northern Territories. Maps and missives covered the massive oak table around which Thalwyn's highest officials had gathered. King Alaric stood at the head, his expression grave as Lord Commander Thorn delivered his report. "They're mobilizing, Your Majesty. Baron Cedric has called his bannermen and allies to Dunhold. Our scouts report unusual activity along the northern trade routes. Supply wagons, messengers riding day and night. Could it be preparations for his wedding to Lady Maera?" Chancellor Marin suggested, adjusting his spectacles nervously. "Such unions often involve significant military displays. No wedding requires 3,000 armed men," Thorn replied grimly, "nor the stockpiling of weapons we've observed." Elswyn listened from her place near the middle of the table, her heart pounding despite her outwardly calm demeanor. The blue and silver dress she wore, now a familiar sight at council meetings, seemed suddenly constricting. "Baron Cedric has no quarrel with Thalwyn," Lord Reynard interjected smoothly. "Our kingdoms have maintained peaceful relations for decades." "Circumstances change," Alaric said, his eyes briefly meeting Elswyn's, "as do motivations." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Though few at the table knew Elswyn's true identity, rumors had begun to circulate that the mysterious advisor from the south might be connected to the northern territories in some way. "Perhaps," Elswyn said carefully, breaking her silence, "we should consider what Baron Cedric hopes to gain through these military maneuvers. No man commits such resources without clear purpose." Reynard's eyebrow arched. "And what insights might you offer regarding the Baron's purposes, Lady Elswyn? You who claim such limited knowledge of northern politics." "I claim no special knowledge," she replied evenly. "Merely an understanding of how ambitious men think. Baron Cedric's pending alliance with House Halford significantly increases his power. Perhaps he seeks to demonstrate that strength to Thalwyn and others." "A show of force, then?" Thorn considered. "Or preparation for something more direct," Alaric countered, tracing a line on the map between Dunhold and Thalwyn. "The question becomes, what has changed to make Cedric believe conflict with us serves his interests now, when peace has benefited both our realms for so long?" The council fell silent, the implication clear to those who knew the truth about Elswyn's past. After a moment, she straightened in her chair, decision made. "Your Majesty, esteemed councillors, I must speak plainly," she began, her voice steady despite the risk she was taking. "I believe I may be the catalyst for Baron Cedric's sudden interest in Thalwyn." Alaric's eyes widened slightly. They had not discussed revealing even this much. "How so?" Chancellor Marin asked, confusion evident. Elswyn chose her words with extreme care. "I possess knowledge that could prove inconvenient to the Baron's current aspirations. Knowledge he may believe I have shared with King Alaric. What knowledge could possibly warrant military mobilization?" Reynard pressed, leaning forward. "Information regarding certain dishonorable actions taken by the Baron," she replied, deliberately vague. "Actions that, if widely known, might jeopardize his standing with potential allies." Lord Commander Thorn studied her intently. "You speak as one with first-hand experience of these actions." "I do." A tense silence fell over the council chamber. Alaric's expression remained carefully neutral, though Elswyn could see the concern in his eyes, concern not for the political implications, but for her personal safety in revealing even this much. "I propose a strategy," she continued before anyone could demand further details. "One that allows us to assess Baron Cedric's true intentions without risking open conflict." Reynard scoffed. "And what strategy might that be, my lady, since you've apparently become our expert on northern politics overnight?" Ignoring his tone, Elswyn rose and moved to the map. "Send an emissary to Dunhold, not officially from the king but from me, someone who can approach indirectly, perhaps posing as a merchant with connections to both courts." "And the purpose of this emissary?" Alaric asked, his interest evident. "To spread carefully crafted information, specifically that I am preparing to make a formal statement to the combined noble houses of Thalwyn regarding certain northern affairs." Her finger traced the route from Highwind to Dunhold. The emissary would observe Cedric's reaction to this news. If he truly fears exposure, he will either accelerate his plans or reveal his intentions through demands. Thorn nodded slowly, appreciation dawning in his weathered face. A clever feint to force his hand. or a dangerous provocation that could hasten conflict, Reynard countered. Better to know his intentions now, while we can prepare, than to wait for him to choose the moment of confrontation, Elswyn argued. Baron Cedric is many things, but patient is not among them. Faced with potential exposure, he will act, and in acting, reveal his true purpose. King Alaric studied the map silently, weighing the proposal. When he finally spoke, his voice was resolute. The strategy has merit. Lord Commander, select your most trustworthy agent for this task, someone unknown to the northern courts but skilled in observation and deception. I have just the man, Your Majesty, Thorne replied. Derek served as a merchant guard before joining the royal forces. He knows trade routes and customs, speaks with a northern accent when needed, and has a face people tend to forget. Excellent. Alaric straightened, his decision made. He leaves at dawn with the necessary documents and credentials. Lady Elswyn, you will brief him personally on what information to convey and what reactions to watch for. As the council dispersed, Elswyn remained behind at Alaric's subtle gesture. When they were alone, he moved closer, his voice low with concern. You took a significant risk today. Revealing even that much connection to Cedric invites questions. Questions were already being asked, she replied. Better to provide some answers on my own terms than have the truth discovered by others. Alaric nodded reluctantly. Still, you've placed yourself more directly in Cedric's path. If he truly believes you threaten his alliance with Halford, he will come for me regardless, Elswyn said with quiet certainty. At least this way, we control the narrative and the timing. A shadow of something fierce crossed Alaric's face. He will not set foot in Thalwyn without my knowledge, nor will he approach you without going through me first. The protective vehemence in his voice stirred something deep within her. Over the months, their relationship had evolved from king and refugee to colleagues and friends, but moments like this hinted at emotions neither had directly acknowledged. I know, she said softly, briefly touching his arm, a gesture of trust that crossed the careful boundaries they had maintained. That's why I felt safe proposing this strategy. In Dunhold, I stood alone. Here, I do not. His hand covered hers for a brief moment, warm and reassuring. Never again will you stand alone, Elswyn. Not while I am king. The promise hung between them, weighted with meanings beyond the immediate crisis. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might say more, but the moment passed as Chancellor Merrin returned with additional maps. Later that evening, Elswyn sat beside Edrin's cradle in her chambers, watching her son sleep peacefully. At 6 months old, he had grown strong and alert, with a smile that reminded her painfully of her own father rather than Cedric. Lady Winna had observed more than once that the boy seemed to possess none of his father's cold calculation, only Elswyn's warmth and resilience. Your father is moving against us, little one, she whispered, gently stroking his cheek. But he doesn't know what I've learned since he left us in that desert, that some women are not so easily buried in sand and forgotten. The game had begun. In earnest now, Cedric with his armies and ambitions, Elswyn with her newfound position and the protection of a king who looked at her with increasingly unguarded admiration. The board was set, the pieces in motion, and somewhere between them rode an emissary carrying carefully crafted bait designed to reveal exactly how far Baron Cedric of Dunhold would go to eliminate the wife he had failed to kill the first time. Her words shook the council. Her plan exposed a darkness that few dared to name. But victory always comes at a cost, and as Elswyn takes her place in the king's war room, a shadow from her past begins to move. Not with swords, but with something far more dangerous: memory. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Click here and watch the next episode.